to our exclusive story last night that the Taiwanese president was invited by FIFA to attend the Women's World Cup final in Australia this weekend. But then she declined the invitation. When we asked the Taiwanese embassy why, they said that's a question for FIFA and the Australian authorities. The Australian Labor government denies it had anything to do with it. Let's bring in National Senator Matt Canavan. Matt, great to see you. Look, you understand that FIFA shouldn't be determining Australian foreign policy, but given the aggression with which China is treating Taiwan, is treating Australia, is treating the United States, isn't it about time that we say this is ridiculous? The president of Taiwan should be allowed in our country.
Absolutely, and all speculation could be removed if the government simply invited the Taiwanese president to come. I mean, it's still only Thursday today, and the final, I think, is on Sunday night, so there is plenty of time to organise her to come, and it would be a great celebration, as you pointed out last night. She's the first female president of Taiwan, so why don't we just do that? And there's obviously a lot of questions that came out of your story last night. You've certainly found some smoke. Who knows where that smoke is coming from, where that fire is. But I think the Australian government has to become clean here about any involvement. I'm certainly concerned that the Australian government these days seems to be a cheerleader for the Chinese Communist regime. We had a spectacle in the Senate last sitting week where it became kind of China News Daily, where each minister in question time was getting up and spruiking how great, how wonderful a leader Xi Jinping was and the decision he made around Bali or flights to Australia. And they failed to even point out that, in fact, you know, the decisions he was making to remove those bans, he put in place the bans in the first place. Maybe they deserve a little bit of criticism for that. But they just seem to be on one side at the moment, and I'm a little bit nervous for Taiwan.
Well, I think this is exactly right, because ahead of Anthony Albanese's anticipated trip to Beijing to meet with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, they are taking a bit of a softly approach. We're not seeing as much commentary as we should about Cheng Lei, journalist and mother, Australian, who's still being detained, or the many other issues that we could be vocal on. So, I mean, is it worth it, this meeting with Xi Jinping? Is it worth it that we should be... you know, Justin Bassey, who was the Chief of Staff to Maurice Payne, who was the former Foreign Minister, he wrote an excellent piece in The Australian last weekend where he pointed out that Australia hadn't even put out a statement relating to Chinese aggression of a Filipino boat. The US put out a statement, but Australia hadn't. So, you know, is the government going too far here?
Well, I certainly think the messaging is getting very clouded. You raised the trip, or the proposed trip, by the Prime Minister, and just a few weeks ago, senior ministers in the government were saying there was no way that the Prime Minister should go unless all of the trade bans, the illegal trade bans that China put on our products a few years ago, are lifted. And then we hear this week that, oh no, maybe the Prime Minister will still go even if wine and lobsters remain banned by China. And this sort of weakness is just an invitation to dictatorial authoritarian regime to ramp up their own aggression, not so much just towards us, but just in the region more generally. And I'm just concerned the government here just hasn't found its feet yet in how it should deal with an authoritarian regime. They are not our close friend or ally. We shouldn't resile from pointing out where they have done wrong to us in terms of the trade bans, or continue to flout the human rights of Australian citizens like Cheng Lei. You're absolutely right. We never hear anything about Cheng Lei from this government. And why isn't she being spoken of ahead of this visit? As I say, there's a lot of questions here. And I'm just a bit worried our positioning in regards to China and what that might mean for China's conduct in response.
Look, I wonder if Anthony Albanese is going to ask Xi Jinping when he eventually meets him any questions about allowing transparency, allowing investigators into Wuhan to actually look at what happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Millions of people have died, but somehow, you know, no one's worried about how the pandemic started anymore. Matt Canavan, thank you very much for joining me this evening.